morning. My name is Steve Fishback. I'm a lawyer with Rhode Island Legal Services. I'm here today to talk about how this situation at Bedford High School and at the Keith Middle School is part of a much larger national problem relating to schools being built on toxic waste sites. This issue first came to light more than 30 years ago when residents in Buffalo, New York learned that their school was built on a contaminated site. That was in a neighborhood known as Love Canal, and that neighborhood is and Love Canal brings out images of people having to be relocated and schools having to be shut down. Love Canal was not the only instance of it. It was like the first one to have come to public light. In New Orleans, an elementary school was built on top of a dump created from the debris of Hurricane Betsy. That school now is closed. In Los Angeles, there was a school known as Belmont High School, which was built on top of an abandoned oil field at an earthquake fault, which had to be torn down and rebuilt. And in Providence, Rhode Island, where I'm from, there are schools that were built on top of the city's former garbage dump, as well as the site of what was the world's largest silver manufacturer at the turn of the last century. So in response to growing activism around schools such as New Bedford High School, Congress passed a law in 2007 directing the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to develop voluntary school siting guidelines. And today, an advisory committee to EPA, the Children's Health Protection Advisory Committee, is sending a report containing recommendations that were made by a broad range of stakeholders in this issue as to what those guidelines should look like. If that report ultimately is what the guidelines take form of, schools such as Keith Middle School and this high school, New Bedford High School, would not be built. And that will be good for children, because children will not be put in harm's way and face exposure risks like they do here at New Bedford High School, where toxic chlorinated solvents were just discovered a few weeks ago. It is the hope of us who are concerned with this issue that EPA will continue to take a leadership role in addressing this issue, both nationally and here at New Bedford High School, and also at Keith Middle School, because without their involvement and without their pressuring state and local officials to take action, the contamination that was discovered a few weeks ago would have not been discovered, and people would still be in harm's way. So to wrap up, it's hopeful that this situation helps publicize the problem of schools located on toxic sites, and that EPA take action, and also that local officials here take action to fully characterize the level of contamination, to fully understand what the exposure risks are, and then to do what is necessary to prevent people, and particularly children, from becoming ill as a result of toxic exposures. Thank you.
So I think Steve summed it up really well. I really appreciate everyone for being here today, and I'll be available to answer questions about the report or about any of the other.
Mr. Fishback, do you believe these two schools should be closed?
I believe these schools should never have been built. Whether they should be closed or not, I think we need to find out more about the nature and extent of contamination, particularly inside New Bedford High School, and also to make sure that the remedial actions that were put in place at Keith are actually being protective. And there's reason to suspect that they're not, because they're PCBs that are leaking into the wetlands that surround this site. So there's definitely cause for concern here. And whether or not they should be closed, I think, should be determined as a result of further investigation of the risks.
Ms. Brody, what do you feel about the future of these two schools?
Well, I definitely agree with Steve. I think I feel exactly the same way, that these schools should never have been built, and I'd like to urge I think a lot of progress has been made overall by the city, by the Environmental Protection Agency, by the state, all working together with the community to make progress to clean up this neighborhood. But I think a lot of progress still needs to be made, and it's worrisome that after hundreds of thousands of dollars have already been spent to millions to assess and clean up contamination on the site, that new sources of contamination are still being found. And so I'd like to, urge all the parties involved to take strong action to protect school building applicants and others in the neighborhood.
Mr. Fishback, can you elaborate a little bit about what you meant when you said that without the EPA's pressure, testing that took place in New Bedford High School would never have taken place? It should be what?
Sure. When EPA approved the building of Keith Middle School, they ordered the city to undertake further investigations at the New Bedford High School and also behind you at some private residences. And that had not been happening. And when the city chose to tried to demolish the houses that are standing behind you, community residents went to EPA and asked them to intervene, which they did do. And EPA, I think, has provided sufficient pressure to the city and to the state's DEP to more fully understand the nature and extent of contamination on this whole Parker Street waste dump. And because of that, this additional testing has been going on, both in the general neighborhood, which is going to start in a few weeks, as well as ongoing testing here at the high school. So that's why I say that EPA has played a very positive role here in ensuring that there is additional testing. And the discovery of these chlorinated solvents inside the school building is a really big deal. It needs to be addressed. And the information that Carol has been unearthing about the number of deaths due to cancer, the state's health department should be investigating whether there's any link between the
Haven't they speculated about solvents may very well have heating?
Well, there's reason to suspect that that's not the source, because they've also been found in the groundwater underneath the school, in these seeps. So that's why when the earlier question about whether the schools should be closed was asked, I said that we still need to know more about the full nature and extent of contamination. But the information that we have now gives us very good reason to believe that the source of those toxic vapors is the ground underneath the school. The discovery of the same chlorinated solvents in the groundwater. The way let me just backtrack and say, if the source of contamination is the ground underneath, the way that it would work its way into the building is that these solvents evaporate. So and when they evaporate, they try to find the path of least resistance, which could be through drains, it could be through cracks in the foundation. If you think of a balloon, and if you puncture a small hole in the balloon, all of the air will rush out of that very tiny hole, and it's because of a pressure differential, and that's what also would be happening here, because the pressure differential exists between what's on the ground and in the school building, and it just draws the vapors into the building. That's why it's important to understand the full nature of groundwater contamination at this site, to understand, and also the source of where these chlorinated solvents are coming from. Are they being transported by the groundwater? Are they in the ground just underneath evaporating? That's the type of information that I think is needed to be found out before a decision about whether to close the school is made.
You folks also feel that the sampling and analysis plan, the testing is going to take place in the periphery of the site. Would it taken place without the EPA's pressure, or do you think that's also EPA pressure? Eddie, you could talk to that.